Hey TV fans, Board now back with you. On this video I will be talking about the first episode of the brand new season of Dexter. So this is a returning comeback season after about 10 years out, or at least in the show Dexter has aged 10 years. The finale of season 8 by the time the show had been run into the ground and just became a very repetitive cash cow. And yes, spoilers alert, because I'm going to go into full spoilers anyway, but Dexter Morgan, having sacrificed his sister, because she was on life support in any case, sort of dived into the river with her. He somehow survived, but he ended up remotely living as a lumberjack. Yes, that's how the long-running series originally ended. The shot of him surviving but showing up in the wilderness as a flipping lumberjack, and everyone in Miami thought Dexter Morgan was dead, along with his sister. It's time for a fresh start, a reboot. Not a total reboot, that's the thing. For me, this is a season 9, it's the start of a new season, it's a sequel season. It just happens to have kind of shaken things up a little bit, giving it a new start. Maybe a soft reboot is the best way to say. There's going to be plenty of Dexter-esque touches throughout by the looks of the first episode, and obviously characters from his past will be involved, which was going to be an intriguing part of this, because very early on there was news that they got the old cast back, or at least some of them. So Jennifer Carpenter, Deborah had signed up. So was she going to appear in flashbacks? How were they going to work her into it? Apparently also John Lithgow, the Trinity Killer, has signed up for this. So again, it must be a similar sort of thing. Very up and down time with Dexter originally. I think it's worth remembering at its best very early on, and this might partly be nostalgia, but I remember it being one of the hottest shows on TV for maybe a small period, but I certainly think that still holds up. Then the early seasons 1 and 4 particularly hold up very well, in my opinion. Some people might disagree. It might partly be nostalgia, but that's why it's so depressing and it got so bad and so tedious by the end. Just such bad writing. So much so that by the end and in the later seasons, you were just rooting for someone to catch Dexter. He really became unlikable himself, and when that happens, you've lost your audience. Dexter is now living in this small New York sort of snowy type town, and it's 10 years not only since that incident with Deborah and the end of season 8, but it's also 10 years since he's killed anyone. New life in this new town. We see that he's working in some sort of like guns and like sort of play type store, and that's a theme in the episode where you get this obnoxious sort of guy who wants to buy a gun, and Dexter doesn't really want to sell it to him, so we kind of get a modern like gun rights type issue, which is a big sort of anxiety right now, and he's just a very obnoxious character. So for a lot of the episode, there's sort of back and forth with him and Dexter, people for Dexter to kill. Like there's a rich guy who I think it definitely turns out by the end. I mean, everyone hates him in town, but it certainly appears by the end that he is the father of this douchebag who is gonna ultimately become Dexter's first kill in 10 years. But they do a certain amount of teasing of who the first kill might be. So there's a set of like new characters. There's actually like a string of local girls gone missing in the town, so that's gonna be a theme in the season. But the big new character is Dexter's new girlfriend, who's actually very likeable. She's a local cop, and she's obviously going to be involved in the investigation. Now, there's slight alarm bells that could be rung in that side of things, because are they going to go to the well of her actually investigating her own boyfriend if, once Dexter gets back in the groove and starts killing? I sort of think they are, and I don't really want them to go down the path, but I will say out of the new characters, she's the most likeable. I didn't really get a handle on a lot of the other characters, and there's certain things where they're just very flat and very OTT. There's like a good example at the end with like the douche who Dexter turns out to be his first kill in 10 years. But most of like the characters they introduced in this episode didn't really do much for me, but she was the one stand out. She was likeable and quite sort of grounded, and seems like someone who they could open up as a character, and you could have a decent relationship there. Looks like Deborah. Yes, she looks like Deborah, and I do not for one moment think that's a mistake. And what really annoys me about this, and fingers crossed they don't go to sort of gross type places, but everyone remembers in season 7 of the original show that terrible cringeworthy storyline where Deborah suddenly out of the blue discovered she has romantic feelings for her brother, having never expressed any of that in the previous seasons. They suddenly dropped that bombshell on us, and it was absolutely terrible. It was one of the lowlights of that original 8-season show, maybe the low light, and it just makes me feel a bit uneasy than they've made this new character, Dexter's girlfriend, look a bit like her. It could be an accident. I don't think it is, because there are certain other like things like that, like Easter eggs and references. I think this, as a comeback season and sort of starting afresh, has a tricky job of like satisfying the core audience, but also introducing new things, updating it. And read the write-up for this episode, and that it mentioned like the Dark Passenger, which was this thing in the original show. It was his father Harry, his dead father Harry, who always spoke to him and set out, was sort of its conscious in a way, or that's the way it was appearing to Dexter. And through the whole thing, the idea was that he was following his father's code when it came to killing, but like covering up your tracks. But this idea then he only killed people who, in his mind, by the criteria, really deserved it. And it was certainly a very interesting idea of the show, and it's the early seasons, at least, it sort of made Dexter sort of more likeable, because he was going after scumbags. And sadly, as much as I liked that actor James Remar, as you got further into the original series and how he kept popping up and saying different things, it really became too much of a gimmick. It became very distracting and just tedious, I guess, like a lot of other things in the later seasons. So of course they're going to return to that, because I guess the fans want it. And I called it from the start. It is Deborah. That's how they're using Jennifer Carpenter. She is Dexter's new Dark Messenger. So they're going to rehash some stuff. And what I'll say, you've probably got a sense that I'm mixed on this first episode. I think there's some stuff I like, some stuff I don't like. Badly the show ended originally. I think I've got low expectations, so that maybe helps. And I will say it's fine. I think it's solid. I think there are definitely, by the end of the episode, there's things I'm not too keen on, which are a bit worrying, because in some ways, to justify its existence, I think they do need to move away from the format of the the old show, because they did that to death over 8 seasons. And I'm not convinced they will. Enough positive anyway for me to return next week and do a second review. Deborah, I think, was the worst thing in this first episode, because it just felt like she wasn't needed, and it was just so over the top and just a bit cliched. And they would go with another family member, his sister this time, and it's just a way to work a way back into it. And I think for fans, they probably want some involvement from Deb. But to me, if you're going to make a fresh start with a show like this, you don't have to bring her back. Maybe in flashbacks, but that's about it. You do make a fresh start for Dexter. And if you keep having all this stuff from the old show and a character like Deborah, I'm sorry, it's very hard for you to really move on. Her scenes just weren't very good. The stuff she was saying to him was very clunky. They go with this whole theme of she's sort of the opposite to Harry, like her dark messenger, in the sense that she seems to be giving him the opposite advice. She's pointing out, well, look at all these victims from the past that are victims because of your way of life, because they got in the line of fire, but it's through knowing you. And obviously she's right, but she starts rattling off the names like Dokes, Legretta, obviously Deborah, various other people, and that stuff is fine because she you sort of agree with her, and it's this morality. But then they cut to this really extreme shot of her just showing a bullet in the thing, and again it's sort of very OTT, where I think a bit of restraint would have been better. And I think it's a better idea moving forward, is you could have several dark messengers if you're going to keep this sort of gimmick. And I'm wondering how, for example, John Lithgow's going to work into it, because the Trinity Killer is dead as well, so you're assuming it's either going to be a flashback. I remember in the original show, in one of the later seasons, they did this sort of twist where another character, I think for one episode or something, appeared as the Dark Messenger. It was his stepbrother in one of the later seasons. I think it was season 7, appeared as Dexter's Dark Messenger. So because I know John Lithgow has been cast, at least for a cameo this season, I do wonder if they might do that with him, where he could replace Deb as the Dark Messenger for one episode or whatever. But my point is, it's a much more interesting idea if you're going to stick with the Dark Messenger, to have people from Dexter's past appear and just keep it a bit more fresh. If they just do it's Deborah all the time and they just rehash the gimmick of what they did with Harry, then it's a lot more boring for me, and it doesn't do enough to freshen things up. You could even have someone like Dokes. You could bring him back, because him and Dexter had this big rivalry back in the early seasons. So wouldn't that be fun if they brought Dokes back and had him as a Dark Messenger? I think that's the best way they can handle that. So I'm guessing that's not what they're going to do. I think for the fan service, they probably want it to be Deborah all the way through, but who knows? They might actually do something bold. Let's hope they do. Get him, because obviously a big part of the original Dexter was it was set in Miami, and it had this very striking visual sort of setting of Miami, and it obviously in the opening titles, which were great. They might look a bit dated now, but when I still rewatch episodes, it still looks great, and it's one of the most clever like opening title sequences I've seen in of Miami. So I actually like that they've gone for the opposite here, and it does look pretty good, like the way it's directed. I think they've got some of the original people, obviously gone for like they've lost the original opening credits at least, which will piss some people off. It kind of annoyed me because I do enjoy those opening credits, but it's at least something where you can say they've gone for a new chapter, because you've just got the big icy Dexter in big letters and New Blood underneath, which is obviously the subtitle, which I think is really lame. I think that's a really generic subtitle, but when you see the end of the episode, I think you know why it's called New Blood. But obviously they've gone for a lot more chilly type look for this series, a different location and a different feel, so that's something I appreciate. Crappy scene, to be fair, like him and this deer having this almost like some sort of a connection, and I'll talk more about that scene in a moment, but the look of it at least, and it just having a slightly different mood, because there's very little music in the episode and it's not as bright and poppy as the original Dexter. Michael C. Hall is on good form, because for a lot of the episode it's almost like he's reacting to things, and it's like the true Dexter hasn't returned yet. He has to take all this abuse from this really obnoxious guy, and then there's sort of certain other things that are happening around the town in his dark side away, and then at random times it comes out when he goes into killing mode basically. So he's very good at that sort of restraint and that sort of anguish and a very sort of blank stare at times. So he's on good form, and there's some nice moments of comedy actually. That's because obviously the original show was quite funny, and this is quite funny as well. There's sort of stuff with him like line dancing, and there's a couple of nice gags. There's some gags that are also very in your face, like a Garfield type cat, where this guy is like named his dog Garfield, and pop culture references sort of crammed in. As I said, apart from his new girlfriend, there's not a lot to really stand out from the new characters. This sort of shelter for people who are new in town, and I think especially young girls, because that's going to play into the fact that these young girls are going missing. But she runs this shelter to just help people new in town who don't have a place, and that sort of makes you quite like her. There's a decent chemistry at least between her and Dexter, so I'm gonna probably look forward to that. But there's other characters around the town which I just didn't like that much. They might grow on me. Crowbar quite a lot of modern themes, so I think Dexter working at this place where they sell guns sort of thing, and you've got this character who, as I said, the douchebag first kill, who I think is sort of trigger happy, and that leads to his demise, because you have seen with Dexter and the deer where I think it's almost like Dexter is like trying to get back into killing mode by going after like animals in the wild. But this other guy rushes in and like kills the deer and gets blood all over Dexter and like sets him off once again. But there's stuff like that. It's almost quite interesting that you have teases of Dexter, with like the sharp instruments that he would normally use for a kill, and it's him doing various things, and it's just teasing, and he could return to his old ways at any time. But maybe in this smaller, more isolated town, he's a bit more restricted. About the episode is actually how they strung that out, you know, who's going to be his first kill. There was at least 2 or 3 different suspects, although it did always seem that it was likely to be this guy from a certain point. But I actually thought they did that quite well, which is why it's a little disappointing and by the end of the episode, certainly in the way he killed the guy. You know, he got him back on his table. He was then trying to get him to admit to his crimes. So by the end, it did felt like they were reverting back to the old Dexter, which to me is a little bit of a disappointment. Ahead with it, because at one point there's like this protest from like climate change protesters, and again you get this character in town, this very unpopular rich guy, and it's again drawing parallels to how some people certainly feel that a lot of rich people are anti-climate change, and it doesn't really suit them, which is obviously true, but in this case it's just very sort of ham-fisted and over the top, and it's almost like they were going for like one too many like modern themes without really working it into the plot. But obviously this rich guy is gonna factor in. He could be the villain of the season. I'm not too sure if he will be, but he sort of could be, or at least play quite a big part. Harrison shows up in town. Now that's Dexter's kid than he had with Rita. So it was because obviously Rita, his girlfriend in the early season, Julie Benz, she had 2 kids already when she met him, but then that they later had this baby, Harrison, who was obviously young for most of the time he was in the show, and now he's obviously grown up, or he's at least like a teen, a late teen, maybe about 17, 18. So he actually shows up, and I'm not quite sure how he tracked Dexter down, but that's maybe a bit of a plot hole. It's something they could come back to later and explain, but he's obviously in town to find his dad. And great bit of casting, by the way, because he does look a lot like Michael C. Hall. That they do look very similar, and he does have that that sort of eerie serial killer intense stare about him as well. So I can't fault that was really good casting. And at first Dexter like denies and he's his father. He says, sorry, you've made a mistake. And this is the thing with Deborah, or the Dark Messenger as she is that she's trying to give Dexter advice, and her advice is, that's it, lie basically. Don't let him know you're his father, because you will just mess up his life the way you have done so many other people. And it's in Harrison's best interest if he doesn't know you. So originally Dexter makes that decision, and he sends him over to his girlfriend's shelter actually, and says, if you want a place to stay tonight, you can stay there, because I guess he shows up quite late. But by the end of the episode, he has a change of heart, and he defies the code that Deborah's been giving him, and actually goes after Harrison. Then he is indeed his father. He confesses, and we'll see how they handle this. Now, it's probably fair to say that at some point Harrison's gonna find out about his father. He's gonna find out he's a serial killer. Are they gonna do the thing they did with Deborah and Dexter, where they sort of go on a rampage? That's certainly a possibility, I think. I think if they're looking at this long term, Now, this is a 10 episode season. Assuming it does quite well, it could get another run and they could sort of reboot it. But they're obviously going to see how it goes. But I do wonder if if they wanted a spin-off, that they could sort of have Harrison become the new Dexter, the next generation almost. I don't know if that appeals to people or not. It would obviously be a risky strategy to replace Michael C. Hall, but let's see what happens. I guess there's possibilities, then there could be good stuff with Harrison. Obviously we'll have to see what the actor's like, and there's probably this concern that if it was just Dexter and Harrison and him training him and him showing his, just revealing himself and saying, yeah, I am this person, this is my past, then it could just get repetitive. It could just be another Dexter Deb type plot, except now with Harrison. But episode, I think it's alright. I think it's solid, was watchable, and definitely had moments that really annoyed me. The Deborah moments did annoy me, and sort of Dexter by the end reverting back to type kind of annoyed me. But that's episode 1, which, as I said, cold snap. I don't know if I did said that, but Dexter is obviously back, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you are a fan of the show. Let me know what you think. What did you think of the first episode? Are you looking forward to more this season, or are you sort of dreading it? Do you have no interest in watching further? And like and subscribe. Share me out on social media. TV series from Sci-Fi, which I've been reviewing. So there's a new episode out this week, so I'll be getting to that. And me and Rachel McDonald in our weekly horror reviews, both film and TV. So lots to look forward to on the channel, and I will be reviewing episode 2 of Dexter next week, so look out for that. Thanks guys, and goodbye.